What is going on, guys? Jack here and welcome back to another Football Manager tactical discussion video. Today I'm going to be talking all about 4-4-2s, perhaps the most widespread formation of the 90s and indeed the noughties, and maybe even now still. It's a formation that, whilst it's fallen out of favour at the highest levels of play, has recently made a resurgence for a few teams. The likes of Iceland and Burnley spring to mind, and whilst it has evolved since its heyday, it's still very much a formation that is relevant in football, a formation I'm sure you're all familiar with to some degree. And today I just want to talk all about it, some thoughts on modern 4-4-2s, how it can be really effective even at the highest level of play, but also about when, using what you can see in front of you is perfectly acceptable to do. So here is what I'd consider to be the most conventional 4-4-2. Kind of the 90s and noughties. This is a formation that can very much work at the lower levels of play, obviously using a target man support and a poacher, kind of that little and large strike partnership. Whilst that's kind of vanished at the highest level of plays, the reason for that being is largely down to just how athletic football has become. You look at the way that teams press now, crossing isn't nearly as common as it once was. And when you have centre-backs, the likes of Van Dijk at the highest level, who leap like a salmon and run like a cheetah, the fundamental and big issue is that with athletic centre-backs, you can't just have a tall player. You can't have a Heskey and an Owen work effectively, because the two strengths that those players brought to the table are often matched by the two centre-backs they'll have against them, particularly at the highest level of play. Regardless, a 4-4-2 like this can work. I'm not going to cover this today because I feel like it's something you're all familiar with. Instead, I want to talk about two different types of 4-4-2s that have been played in the Premier League in recent years, one by Burnley and one by Crystal Palace. We'll start, I think, with the Burnley one first because it's also the one that Iceland use and it's probably the most common of the two. And the reason that this 4-4-2 is used so often is because it's so solid defensively. In modern football, a lot of the top teams play extremely fluid systems with a number of attacking midfielders. Going back to when the emergence of 4-2-3-1 really first happened, the idea that you'd have a centre attacking mid and then two kind of inside forward wingers playing between the lines of a midfield and defence was quite a new one. And as a result, 4-4-2 didn't really fit the purpose anymore. You kind of got overwhelmed by players playing between the lines. In modern football, however, 4-4-2 is seen a lot more defensively. A great example, of course, being Burnley, who qualified for the Europa League last year, playing a 4-4-2, had not necessarily the greatest attacking track record, but defensively they were absolutely outstanding, and that was largely down to their 4-4-2. So in terms of this, we're going to be playing with two low blocks of four, that being a defensive quadruplet, a quintet. Is that 5 or 4? It doesn't matter. The goalkeeper's included. Defensive quintet, and we'll go with the fullbacks on defence, centre backs, and then obviously you could go with fullbacks as I'm going to here, or indeed you could go with wing backs. With this kind of defensive 4-4-2 setup, I do feel like fullbacks are better. One instruction that I like to use on them when I'm going to use them in Football Manager is sit narrower. Obviously, with systems and particularly the prolificness of inside forwards within modern football tactical systems, you'll find a lot of players, say Will Hughes is the attacking winger on Navarro here, who will look to sit in the gap between the centre back here and the right back. They'll find this pocket of space in between. So what you'll see a lot of modern teams do is play this more compact style of play where they'll tuck their fullbacks in a little bit deeper defensively. This then allows the wide midfielders to track the wider space either side of the fullback, to ensure that crosses don't come in, and it can also help the wide players to press out. Essentially what you're doing by having the fullbacks sit in a more narrow system is encouraging teams to play wider, and when they play wider, you can then start to press and harry them. Of course, a team that has the ball in the centre of the pitch can go left or right. Once a team commits to a wing, they are essentially playing with a wall to their backs, that being the byline, and as a result they have half the options to go to. So in sitting narrower, you can sometimes create that area for teams to get suckered into attacking in. But because of how compact your defence is, because of how competent your players are in the air, as I mentioned, modern athletic centre-backs particularly, they can deal with the ball really nicely. And a great example would be Burnley, who are very good at dealing with the ball in the air, but equally they do as a team work very hard defensively. In this kind of system, of course, the two centre mids not really going to be getting forward too much. The wide midfielders, obviously you could play them as wingers, although wingers are more likely to get further up the pitch. With this system, the Burnley system, we're looking for our wide players. Yes, they are going to be making supporting runs from deep, but their primary duty is to form part of this back 8 here and really work things well. In terms of strikers in modern 4-4-2s, it's kind of interesting because whilst you certainly do see the odd strike partnership here and there, what is becoming more and more apparent is that teams are more willing and, I guess, desiring further to have an advanced playmaker, or certainly a link-up man here who plays as a centre attacking midfielder who really is this link-up player. It offers two benefits over playing with two strikers. Firstly, it means you're going less long ball to two players lurking up the field. Instead, you've got this player here who can be the out ball, be that for the centre mids, be that for the fullbacks to try and get to, without just lumping it forward to strikers going quite as long distance. And the other benefit, of course, of this kind of player is they can tuck in and do a defensive duty. If you want to play them on support, they can join the defence further. And whilst you will be, maybe leaving your lone striker on his own, particularly if your primary philosophy at your team is to be defensive, it can be very beneficial in that regard. In terms of roles you can use here, I like attacking midfielder on attack. Advanced playmaker is another nice one. Shadow striker too. Looking for a player who's really going to be making runs. Certainly something that you can look to do. Equally, you could try playing a deep line forward on support. Of course, with this deep line forward on support, they kind of start in a more advanced area and drop deeper when you have the ball. So whilst they can offer an out ball, they're not going to be offering nearly as much defensively as a centre attacking midfielder. And equally, when you might be more wanting players to run ahead of the advance forward, you're actually just going to leave them more isolated. So as a result, if you are looking to play this kind of system in terms of this is how you want to approach your attack with kind of this link-up player, your two centre mids being fairly disciplined, and then really looking at your striker, your wide men and your centre attacking mid to be the four players really making a impact when you do have the ball. I do feel like having a centre attacking mid is the way to go in that regard. It kind of means you're going to lose the ball a little bit less in the centre. It always gives you advance forward someone to go back to. And particularly with just how common two centre-back systems are, matching 2 for 2 in terms of your two strikers against two centre-backs, in my opinion, isn't nearly as good as playing a more fluid system where your main striker might sit in between the two defenders, and then this player here in the attacking midfielder role makes runs either side and really runs into the space that emerges. But anyway, that's just one way that you can approach a 4-4-2. Another one I want to talk about is Crystal Palace's, because I think it's another interesting one. This is a system they've not used every game, certainly, but there's been a few games where Roy Hodgson has played Andros Townsend and Wilfried Zaha as the two main strikers, which might seem odd, not to go with Benteke, who's that obvious target man option, but there is a reason for that. And it's the fact that, they're looking for the front four players to be the main penetration of their attack, rather than the central midfielders, who will occasionally make runs from deep. But, in reality, their primary duty here is to really screen the defence to fill in the gaps of these other players running in ahead. Particularly at a higher level, 4-4-2 is never going to be a particularly great attacking formation. There's better options out there. But in terms of giving yourself a defensive base to build off, particularly if you do play, with, if we look here, out of possession, maybe a slightly deeper line and then your players even deeper, if you can compress this space between your back four and your four midfielders, you really can nullify a lot of the more fluid attacking systems that look to utilise numerous attacking midfielders to kind of plug the gaps and find pockets of space. That space just doesn't exist with a 4-4-2. But as I said, it does come with the crux that attackingly it can be somewhat lacking. So anyway, in terms of what Crystal Palace do, and it's something that you can achieve a few different ways. You can do this with inverted wingers or just wide midfielders, potentially on attack with a few player instructions certainly, is Palace will play with Wilfried Zaha and occasionally Andros Townsend as their front two. This has changed throughout the year recently. This is going back a couple of years ago when they first started using this. To be honest, I've not seen as much of Palace this year, so I can't tell you if it's as common as it once was. But what they do is they'd have two very fluid forwards who are your more traditional wingers. And these guys would act as the attackers. And obviously, being traditional wingers, they are not players who are going to win the ball in the air. But what they offer is a very well-rounded technical skill set in terms of they're fluid in their movement, fairly good with the ball at their feet, good at passing, good at trying to dribble and seek out pockets of space. And obviously, they have a lot of pace, which can be particularly good for getting big balls over the top. But what Palace would also do, and what you'll see, I believe Senegal have done this as well, is they'll play with these wider players as, say, inverted wingers on attack, just for this example. And what they're looking to do is, with a slightly more fluid system, instead of having kind of an advance forward or a poacher, these supporting players are going to drift out of position, hopefully bring the defenders with them, and then these inverted wing backs, or if they were wide midfielders on attack, will look to make on-running runs ahead and kind of these surging runs in front. These wide players are going to attack from deep. That can be particularly good from the counter-attack, but because of just how fluid your front two is going to be, they're going to try and pull players apart and create space for these other players to run into. If you have very, very pacey players and you're normally playing inside forwards, but you want kind of a very solid defensive strategy, this can be a good one to go to, particularly if you've not got that kind of out-and-out big target man forward. And obviously, with this kind of system, this fluid attack, two strikers, the weakness of it in modern football can be just how static it is, as I mentioned, in terms of two strikers stood on two centre-backs. If they are being more fluid and dynamic like this, it can overcome one of the big weaknesses of a modern kind of front two. And again, I think it's something worth looking into. So I talked about the traditional 4-4-2. Talked about two different philosophies in terms of going forward with a very fluid attack, or using an attacking midfielder as a link-up man. I feel like with the latter two, certainly definitely most beneficial when you're going to be playing a more cautious style of football where your primary aim is to not concede. Naturally, you are going to leave yourself somewhat open with this kind of system if you do choose to play inverted wingers on attack. Of course, you could try playing them on support as well. And they're going to look to do a lot in terms of punishing the channels. The other advantage of these inverted players is they will look, to hit behind a lot of the time fullbacks that go forward. If a team that you're coming up against is a team that commit lots of men forward into the attack, particularly with their fullbacks, this is a system that can really punish them, particularly if two centre-backs are left on their own. The wing-backs go forward. These more supportive players are going to drag these players here, there and everywhere, and if the fullbacks don't get back, you really can punish them with this kind of tactic. In terms of pressing, I feel like this is just worth talking about. You're not really going to do it with this system. There are 4-4-2s or 4-4-1-1s that have done pressing in the past. Barcelona did it for a while, where they'd have Suarez players are pressing forward. That's not to say it's something that you can't do, but I think if you're the kind of team that is playing a 4-4-2 to be defensive, looking to press, looking to push players up, is only going to create that space in behind that players are going to try and exploit. Unless your whole team's going to press together or really work hard and be athletic, it kind of undoes, I feel like, one of the big strengths of this kind of system, which is the low block or two low blocks of four that make up a really solid 8-man defence in front of the goalkeeper. So yeah, I guess in summary, 4-4-2, great defensive formation at the higher levels of play. Unfortunately, the strengths of the conventional 4-4-2 and the littered and large stripe partnership that would kind of be a traditional hallmark of that system just doesn't work at the highest levels of modern football. Pressing is such a big thing. Crossing isn't nearly as common as it once was. There isn't as much time and space in the wide areas to whip in real balls of quality. And additionally, centre-backs and indeed just players across the entire pitch are so athletic now that the specialisation of kind of a big target man and a poacher just isn't something that really works in modern football. But anyway, guys, that's just a quick discussion on the 4-4-2. Just a few tactical ideas to maybe try out in terms of different ways you can approach hitting teams on the counter and, of course, playing on the attack. All in all, very good formation, very, very solid defensively. Different ways that you can tweak this certainly to your own tastes. If you've been using 4-4-2 in FM19, let me know how you've been getting on with it, how you've been deploying it. Let me know what you thought of this video as well. As I said, this is, as much as it's a guide and hopefully giving you guys some food for thought, it is very much built upon some of my opinions, just my own personal take on football. And, well, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and you might not necessarily agree with everything that I've said today. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this video, please do leave a like on it. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. Of course, if you're new to the channel, subscribe. Let me know what future tactical discussions like this you'd like to see me do in the future. And other than that, it is me, Jack, and I will talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.